Amigas rock.
Amiga forever.
Amigas suck.
Don't worry, we pelted in with the Atari STs for saying that. So last weekend, a load of Amiga fans from all around the world made our annual trip to the lovely Irish town of Athlone for Amiga Ireland. Now, it was a very early start for us on Friday morning. I could tell by the fact that the radio station in the car on the way to the airport was talking about night shift workers still, but it was worth braving a cold January morning at 5 a.m. to fly out to Ireland for this amazing event. After a short 1-hour flight from East Midlands Airport to Dublin, we were met at the airport by a lovely chap called Kenny, who was attending the event and offered very kindly to drive us the 1-hour journey from Dublin to Athlone. And because of our really early flight, that did mean that we got to Athlone quite early. I think it was around 8:50 in the morning that we arrived. So we did have a few hours to kill before the hotel would let us check in at midday. So Kenny actually gave us a bit of a guided tour of the town. Now, at the risk of turning this video into the travel show, I thought I'd just quickly show you a few of the historic sites that we saw in Athlone, because it is a beautiful town, just perfect for a visit, even if you're not attending an Amiga show like we were. Checking out some of the attractions like the castle and the old school cannons are here as well. These are so cool. And we actually earmarked the oldest pub in Ireland, Sean's Bar, and we thought we'd have a return trip there at a time that's a bit more acceptable to have a beer than 9 o'clock in the morning. And speaking of breakfast time, if you're in Athlone, highly recommend a lovely little cafe that we found called Cloud9 for food. I think we actually had about 4 meals here over the weekend. Really nice. The Amiga Ireland event itself was actually held at a new venue this year, the lovely Sheraton Hotel, which gave us a lot more room than previous years. Now, to make life easier, I actually stayed at the hotel itself, which was really handy, and it meant that it was literally a short trip upstairs to my room. And as you can see, I thought I'd do a quick little hotel room tour here. The rooms were actually really nice, and I did start to really regret not bringing my Amiga CD32 or something to hook up to that lovely 50-inch TV that was on the wall. Now, heading down one floor, we had this really big hall on the first floor of the hotel, and loads of Amigas were set up, of course, and it was just great to socialise with everyone all weekend long. But apart from that, they also had talks and workshops and lots of classic Amiga games and hardware that you could sit down and play. And they also had gaming tournaments on all weekend too, on these big screens around the hall. And this is a guy called Daniel who thrashed everybody else at Stunt Car Racer and managed to bag himself a lovely trophy as a result. Nice one, Daniel. And there were some really interesting machines on display as well, including this Mr. FPGA machine running an Amiga core that was shown to me by a great guy called Seamus, who also had this modded Amiga 600 case with a Raspberry Pi inside. And he'd used a device called a Keyra that meant you could actually use the original Amiga 600 keyboard. And I was trying to get a little bit of sneaky footage of it without putting off this guy who's playing Cannon Fodder too much. There was also an Amiga 1200 with the recent A1200.net black replacement cases. And there were lots of different models of Amigas on display, including a couple of CD32s. I did like this actually, a PS2 keyboard that was plugged into a Terrible Fire expansion that actually matches the look of the CD32 pretty well, I think. And yeah, I was intentionally trying to put Darren off that game. And next to it, we had the beautiful Checkmate digital black case. Now, this was a recent Kickstarter by Steve Jones to make these retro Amiga 3000 inspired cases that you can hold all kinds of machines inside, including PCs, Raspberry Pis, and as you can see here, it can hold Amigas as well. Now, in this one, there was an Amiga 500 with a Vampire FPGA accelerator fitted, and I love the look of this black case. There were also a couple of Commodore 64s on display, and lots of Amigas just set up with 2 joysticks or twin controllers that meant that you could just sit down and play whatever you wanted on them. There were also people doing repairs and recapping over the weekend. And Amiga Kit are there as well. They are, of course, the biggest Amiga-only retailer in the world, and they were there showing off some of their new products. Now, I actually let Matthew from Amiga Kit talk me through some of their new expansions that they've only just launched, and they were selling for the first time at this show.
This RAM expansion uses BGA memory and features an FPU socket.
Oh, great.
And it should come in at a very good price, about half of what's currently on the market. And the same technology is used in the new Zoram A2000. A couple of years ago we did the Zoram A4000, and this is an extension of that product line. 8 megs of memory. Both of them can use Ranger memory on 5.5 megs. and 4 megs as well for added compatibility. We have A500 expansions and A600 expansions as well. These are for the A500 Plus.
It's 1 megabyte. Yeah.
1 megabyte?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the new fast IDE. And you've got the optional Gale adapter, which increases the speed of the hard drive transfers.
Faster IDE.
Yeah, faster IDE, and it just plugs on and off.
And this is for 1200 and 600.
1200 and 600, yeah.
And how much are you selling these for?
They should be around the £35
Wow.
mark. Excluding this will be an optional extra. The floppy switches, so you can switch between if you've got an external Gotek or an internal floppy drive. You can easily connect it up.
And everyone needs these. Floppy disk labels.
Oh yeah.
Hard to get hold of these days. There were tutorials and workshops all weekend long on everything from 3D rendering. Vicky from Pixel Vixen on YouTube did a workshop on pixel art on D-Paint as well that was really good. And Doug from the fantastic 10-minute Amiga Retrocast did a live web conference with Trevor Dickinson, who is the man behind Aeon and the new range of Amiga 1 machines. And he was taking questions online and relaying them to the audience and doing a live web stream as well. And there was new software being shown off at the show too, including a very addictive game that everybody was queuing up to play on the Saturday called Dodgy Rocks. Now, I actually had just a couple of minutes to chat to John Gervin, who is the guy behind the game, to find out a bit more about it.
This game started as a Power Rangers game that I made for my son, because he's fan of the Power Rangers, and obviously I couldn't release a Power Rangers game, so it turned into Dodgy Rocks.
How did you make it? What's it written in?
This is the Amiga version. It was not done by me, it was done by Rob. The original was written in an engine called Goto Engine, but this is written in Blitz Basic. It's available, the PC, iOS and Android versions are available for download now, and the Amiga version is not quite finished yet. It will be on Aminet as soon as it's ready.
For free?
For free, yeah.
Oh, great. There were several Amiga legends here as well, including former Commodore engineer Dave Haney, who made the trip over from America and was interviewed on stage by Boat from the brilliant Amigos podcast. And you can watch the full thing on their channel. I will put a link in the video description. And on Friday night, we had a cake cutting ceremony just before we all went off for dinner by former Commodore UK boss David Pleasance and Trevor Dickinson, who cut into this lovely Amiga 35 cake. Now, obviously, it's not all about the hardware and the software and the systems. Socialising is a huge part of events like this as well. And we went out for dinner and drinks on both nights. I mean, you can't really say no when someone hands you a pint of Guinness in Ireland. And on the Friday night, we went out for this delicious curry. I've got to say, it's probably one of the nicest curries I've ever had in my life. And around 60 of us took over this lovely little Indian restaurant in Athlone. And Mike Clark, who you may know, he was formerly of Psygnosis, did music on games like Hired Guns, Lemmings 2 and Microcosm, and actually did the theme for our Retro Hour podcast as well. We found out it was actually his birthday that day, so we couldn't let that go by without a bit of a celebration.
Happy birthday to you.
Hooray! Speech!
Thank you.
And we ended up in a great traditional Irish pub called Gertie's. And we had this private room at the back just packed with Amiga fans, talking about all sorts of Amiga stuff. Dave Haney was giving us tales about his time at Commodore and systems he was working on, and also playing with a few systems as well, like this great little modern Game Boy clone that was demoed to me by a lovely guy called Eamon. Now, unfortunately, I got to the bar just a little bit too late to be included in the annual picture, which this year was Lemmings themed, but I did get David Pleasance to model one of the wigs a bit later. And the party went on well into the night. I think I got to bed around 3 a.m, and a lot of them were still going strong at that point. And on the Sunday morning, with a slightly sore head, we actually didn't fly back until 7 p.m. on Sunday evening, so decided that we'd spend the day having a look around Dublin. And again, thank you, Kenny. He drove us there from Athlone and actually gave us a great tour of Dublin and some of its historical landmarks, which was really interesting. And that fresh Irish winter air did wonders for the Sunday morning hangover. And Kenny also pointed out this famous fish and chip shop, which has had celebrities from all over the world go in there, including Snoop Dogg, Colin Farrell, and Peter Andre. You may know that as well as computers, I'm well into my DJing too, so we checked out a few of the local record shops. And speaking of retro gaming, this incredible shop called The Rage. Now, I've actually visited this shop before, but everyone kept telling us that we need to go back to this place, and they kindly let me film a bit of footage inside the shop. And there is all sorts in here, including plenty of box systems. And I love this wall of classic consoles and computers they've got. There were loads of games on display for sale and many retro machines. You had NES, Mega Drive, N64, Dreamcast, Sega Saturn, lots more both boxed and loose. And prices were actually pretty reasonable, usually a lot less than you pay on sites like eBay. And in the corner, I did spot a few really old school games for the Atari 2600 and even a few Spectrum cassette tapes as well. It is quite a small store and the space is split between games and vinyl, but if you are in Dublin and into retro gaming, highly recommend that you have a visit to The Rage, really cool place. So that was Amiga Ireland 2020. This is actually my second time at the show, and I enjoyed it even more than last year. Like I mentioned before, they actually outgrew their previous venue. That meant they had to get this bigger space this year, and luckily, they got even more people through the door, which is a sign of just how healthy the Amiga scene is at the moment that these shows are continuing to grow. And actually, it was that much of a success, they've actually booked the venue again for next year already, so tickets I'm sure will be on sale for Amiga 2021 Ireland very shortly. And before then, there are more events coming up too. Flashback 2020 in Holland in June that incorporates Amiga 35, and there will be an Amiga 35 event in the UK coming up in October. So if you're an Amiga fan, already lots of events to look forward to in the next year. And did you know that I also do a weekly retro gaming podcast? The Retro Hour podcast comes out every single Friday, and we're joined by special guests on every episode. People like Nolan Bushnell, Dave Haney, Charlie Brooker, and lots more people as we do exclusive interviews in each episode. And we bring you the retro gaming stories from the last 7 days. And you can download it every Friday from Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts, or head to our website at theretrohour.com. And while you're on YouTube, you might want to check out a few more of my videos and consider maybe supporting me on Patreon. Now, I do get a lot of requests off people asking me to make more regular videos on this channel, and you may have noticed recently I've been trying my best to do that at the expense of other things in my life, like sleeping. So any help that I get with that is going to be massively appreciated, helping me improve the quality of the channel, and of course buying more cool stuff to show off as well. So if you'd like to support me on Patreon, that will be massively appreciated. I've literally just launched it, so you could even be my first backer. I'll put a link in the video description. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.